Stone Ocean's finale changes everything for the Jojoverse. The story that began in Phantom Blood finally comes to a close here, with the fate of humankind on the line. But what actually went down? Things move quickly towards the end, and the story can get a little confusing. Well, we're here to give you a proper breakdown of Stone Ocean's finale and what exactly happened. Let's get to it. What just happened? Let's start with the basic facts of the matter. Enrico Pucci won. He completed the ritual Dio had outlined in his diary and transformed his stand into a godlike state. While the translation refers to Pucci's final stand made in heaven, the original Stairway to Heaven is more accurate. It's the final step needed to create his paradise. This stand allowed Pucci to rapidly accelerate time and essentially reset the universe. He fulfilled Dio's dream and became God, reworking reality into a new form where everyone could foresee the future. However, Pucci had not defeated the original timeline's Emporio. He shouldn't have had a problem dealing with an unarmed child while in control of a stand as mighty as made in heaven. But as uneven as this battle seemed at a glance, Emporio formed a smart plan, taking advantage of the injury Jolene gave Pucci to trick the priest's foresight. He still had the disc-holding weather report. That blind spot was enough to give him the stand's powers, allowing Emporio to fight Pucci on something approaching an even level. With oxygen poisoning and a lot of punching, the kid took down the would-be god, and with that, the world shifted again. The final scene brings us to a new Earth, one without the curse of prophecy affecting everyone. We see Jolene and Anasui, now Irene and Anna kiss, giving Emporio and Hermes a lift through the desert. With Pucci dead and the timeline reset, none of them were ever locked up in Green Dolphin Street Prison. Our final shot is this final Joestar crew cruising down the road, reunited and finally free. That's it! Not just for Stone Ocean, but for this continuity as a whole. The story begun in Phantom Blood finally wraps up here. The next JoJo part, Steel Ball Run, begins an entirely new saga set in its own world. This is where the story of the Joestars and their battle with the legacy of Dio Brando finally comes to an end. But how did this happen? What allowed Pucci to just reset reality like that? Why were people able to foresee the future after he reset the world? And what does it mean for the future of the Joestar family should Araki ever return to this continuity for a follow-up? Well, we'll go through all of that presently. In the meantime, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and give that notification bell and like button a good old-fashioned... Now, let's start breaking down what happened with Stone Ocean's ending. The man who destroyed the JoJo universe. To understand Made in Heaven, how it works, and what its defeat means, we need to talk about Enrico Pucci. While he's spent so long following Dio's wishes, that's a bit of a red herring. His beliefs are at the heart of the stand. They were the basis of the world he originally made, and his defeat is what the reboot universe is built on. So let's go over Pucci's past, his version of faith, and why it ultimately failed him. As a young man in the priesthood, Pucci was deeply touched by fate. He was but a humble assistant, sweeping the floor of his church on the day Dio Brando happened to be lurking within. This really should have gotten Enrico killed. Dio has never been known for his kindness or mercy. However, the ancient vampire was taken with the priest's honesty. Perhaps he appreciated Enrico letting him stay within the church rather than throwing him out as a suspected thief. Perhaps Dio saw something in the young Pucci that he himself hadn't realized. Either way, the ancient villain was generous, healing Pucci's twisted foot and gifting him a familiar arrowhead. More important, however, were a few words Dio shared with the young priest, words that would later come to define his entire existence. Do you believe in gravity? That there must be a reason you tripped over me of all people? Are not all meetings a form of gravity? Fate has always seemed to be an active thing in the JoJo universe. It's not something quantifiable, but Dio is far from the only person to wonder about it, and it would end up defining Pucci's life. One day, as he was cleaning the confessional, a woman entered the booth from the other side. The woman didn't realize the young man in a robe and collar was just an assistant. She had been struck down with a deadly illness and had a sin to confess before she died. 16 years ago, she swapped her dead newborn child for a living boy from a different family. When Enrico asked for the family name, she confirmed that they were a couple called Pucci. She had raised their child these last 16 years, while our young acolyte grew up knowing nothing of his secret brother. Pucci was conflicted. He wanted to approach this young man, West Bloomerine, and tell him the truth. It must have been a temptation for even a saintly man. He had a brother, one he'd never gotten a chance to meet. Who wouldn't want to get to know their kin? But confession is a sacred rite in the Catholic Church. Exposing secrets learned within would violate Enrico's faith. He had resolved to say nothing of Miss Bloomerine's confession to her son or his own family. But in the meantime, things had gotten complicated. Wes Blue-Marine, while going about his day, met the youngest sibling of his unknown household, Perla Pucci. He had made a good first impression on her too, retrieving her bag from a purse snatcher. In almost no time, the two had fallen in love, not knowing that they were in fact siblings. The only one who knew that was Acolyte Pucci, whose lips were still sealed thanks to the sanctity of the confessional. Enrico needed to drive his brother away. He still couldn't explain the situation without violating Miss Blue-Marine's confession, so he hired a private eye to drive off the young man. However, the man he hired was apparently a bigot, who determined that Wes's incorrect father had been African American. As such, he tried to hang Wes rather than simply scare him off. Seeing her one true love seemingly dead, Perla took her own life. Enrico was left with two seemingly dead siblings and no one to blame. Do you see how fate keeps affecting Pucci's life? In a vacuum, it looks like a force is driving him toward action. Every time events overtake him, Pucci tries not to intervene directly. He lets Dio go, accepts the mother's confession, and shares nothing with Wes and his family. Even when he does intervene, he does so via convoluted means rather than just acting himself. Left with Perla, his mind goes to Dio. This conversation about gravity rang like a bell in Pucci's consciousness. Unknowingly, all three siblings were drawn together. Was this inevitable? It felt like the pull of fate had led to this outcome. What could he have done differently? Some people would have considered this tragedy their own fault, but Pucci denied that. This could not have been prevented. This was fate. A tide of events was dragging him along no matter what broke along the way. It was these feelings of hopelessness that drove Pucci to Dio and formed the foundations of the heaven he sought. Dio always believed in greater powers ruling over humanity. He believed it should be him and had his eyes on the throne of heaven. But it's not like Pucci wanted the job. The priest drew strength from listening to his friend's meditation on fate and greater powers. Dio's diary was purely his own theorizing about a path towards achieving heaven, not some ancient mystery. The steps and words were all intuited on his part, through guesswork and gut feeling. But Pucci had faith in his friend's wisdom. He followed its steps perfectly, and at the end, it gave him everything he wanted. If that comes from Dio's wisdom or Pucci's fervent belief in his friend, it's kind of a moot point. What matters is the result, and the result was glorious. Made in heaven. Once he completed Dio's ritual, Pucci's stand was transformed into its final state. By merging with the Green Child, we finally see the culmination of all his hard work. Made in Heaven is a beast of a stand. In direct combat, it's one of the most powerful the series has seen so far. Its master of gravity is absolute, and a universal mastery of gravity gives it control over time itself. While fans like to think of this as tied to Einstein's theory of relativity, it's more likely to be rooted in Pucci's own beliefs. To him, the flow of human history is all about gravity, the interplay of one force upon another, great powers that humanity can't resist. Thus, mastery of gravity gives him, in turn, mastery of time. It's not something witnessed in the two snake forms, but Made in Heaven finally gives him that pinnacle. So, we have both mobility, battlefield control, and ludicrous speed. A strong combination for a short-range stand. Even Star Platinum's time stop isn't a strong defense. Pucci can simply accelerate time around it, bringing Jotaro back to reality early. It's no surprise that Jolene's team were unable to defend against Pucci in this form. Even Dio himself would have had trouble fighting his disciple at this point. However, this is just the start of what Pucci's new power can do. The biggest effect, the one that changes everything, is what happens when Made in Heaven's time acceleration is brought up to full effect. When Pucci concentrates, no longer having to worry about a fight, time starts accelerating for everyone. This is where the universe reset comes in, the whole reason for Pucci's plan throughout Stone Ocean. Only living things surrounding Pucci himself are preserved. Their clothing, belonging, even artificial implants wither away. Rocks shift, tides go mad, and stars wink out. Made in Heaven brings time forward so fast that the universe ends before our very eyes. All matter contracted into a singular point, the long-theorized Big Crunch. But following that, we saw a second Big Bang. A new universe is born, expanding outwards from the singularity. And this is where Pucci's beliefs come into play. Enrico believed in destiny. He thought that everything happened for a reason. So the universe remade through his stand's time acceleration was pretty much the same as the universe we had seen before. There was still an Earth, still human life. Since those things happened due to fate, they would happen again. In Pucci's mind, all of history was a matter of cycles, with everything repeating itself time after time. Fate's design remained largely unchanged. Pucci's acceleration brought this new world to a point in time shortly before he left. All the same people who lived in the first world remained in this one, most having lived new lives during accelerated time, others literally being brought forward alongside Pucci. Those few rode the coattails of Made in Heaven, seeming to remember their lives in the world before, but with no idea what had happened to them. From their perspectives, a few seconds have passed and they're back where they started. The new world accounted for these displaced people, leaving new clothes and accessories by their side. It's like they never left. However, Pucci's new world would be different from the one before, thanks to one key addition. The priest gave everyone the ability to see their own fate. They could look forward in time, seeing exactly what their actions will lead to. This world worked on a principle of absolute predestination. Everyone could see their own future. The consequences were already clear. To many people, that idea is inherently deeply horrifying. Imagine if every tragedy in your life, every bad day, every failure was set in stone. Nothing you could do would change them. Your choices are effectively meaningless. You're nothing but a puppet on a string. It's the stuff of total despair. Yet to Enrico Pucci, this was his version of heaven. His stand gave him authority to rewrite this new world, and total predetermination is what he chose. And it makes sense for him to want this. Absolute fate removes personal responsibility. There's no reason to feel guilt. No need to second-guess your choices. In the priest's mind, this would be a world of total acceptance and understanding. No one would have to worry about the consequences of their actions now. Fate could be foreseen. Tragedy would be expected. Humankind would have nothing left to fear. It's an interesting philosophical bit. For some people, that sort of knowledge is indeed comforting. If your life is chaotic or bleak, there's a real temptation in that feeling of control. But the outlook is inherently fatalistic. To accept Pucci's heaven, you have to accept that your choices in life are inherently meaningless. Nothing you can do will affect the outcome of events. To Pucci, the man who saw his brother and sister killed by fate, that has to have been a comfort. It's what he wanted in that life-changing tragic moment, and it's what he thought everyone would best appreciate. This would be a world where fate was in absolute control, ruled by an ultimate power. This was the ideal world Dio had always envisioned, albeit without the ancient vampire in control. This would be the best thing for everyone. But would anyone else appreciate this truth? Certainly not Emporio. The kid even proved that the concept of inevitable predestination was a lie even in the world made by Pucci. Even with the full power of Made in Heaven, being able to see exactly how the future was supposed to go, the priest didn't see the young boy's trick with the stand disc coming. And that was because of a choice Jolene made in fighting against an impossibly strong opponent. Slashing his eye wasn't enough for her to win her own fight, but that pointless act of defiance led to real consequences. Emporio credits his victory to fate, but in truth, he's the one who has proven destiny worthless. That's something the Joestars have demonstrated time and again across every part of the series. Effort and willpower can always change the future. No one power can truly dominate the world. Not even Dust remains. What happened next? Pucci's end is, ironically, a complete unknown. The last we saw of him was Emporio and Weather Report pummeling the priest to a bloody pulp as the oxygen concentration poisoned his mortal form. It seems clear he died, but with the amount of cosmic confusion going on, even that's not absolutely sure. For all his attempts to dictate fate and his reset of the universe, his death in the midst of a timeline reset is confusing. And what happened to him in the rebooted universe remains unclear. While Pucci seems scared of dying before the moment when he first attained Made in Heaven and suggests that doing so would create a paradox, this is a mistake on his part. After all, appearances aside, he has not traveled in time. Time has simply progressed around them. Thus, the effects of his death seem quite mysterious. The simplest assumption to make with what we know is that Pucci is simply gone from this new timeline, erased entirely. That would certainly be a fitting end for him. The man who believes so totally in the way things were meant to be found himself ruled out of the world entirely. However, that would not fit the way Made in Heaven has operated thus far. Bar some minor changes, everything happens the same way on each parallel Earth. That includes a good portion of personal history. Enrico Pucci might be a different man, but he should exist all the same. Not the person we knew, but a new version, just like Irene, unburdened by the sins of his past self. If Pucci himself has any impact on this world, it comes from those final moments. He was still the one commanding Made in Heaven as the universe reset. If he was able to serve as a god of sorts, granting his people the ability to see the future, perhaps his architect's hand remained. Pucci might have managed to recreate the foresight effect, but chose not to. Emporio's words must have struck home with him. Fate was what made him lose. Justice is the will of fate, and acceptance granted him no peace. Perhaps it was those words that inspired Pucci to guide this Earth down a more kindly path. It wouldn't be a coincidence that all our characters seem to be doing better in this world. Perhaps he never lost his brother in this timeline. He and Weather Report may have grown up together, the best of friends who'd have each other's back no matter what. With the ability to rewrite the flow of history, there's no limit to how far this might have gone. Could Joseph have been an actual father to Josuke? We saw that Jotaro and Irene now get along much better. If this is going back far enough, who knows? Maybe a young Dio Brando and Jonathan Joestar became true brothers as well. The sky's the limit. Here's hoping Araki brings us back to this continuity sometime soon. What do you think may be different about this post-reset world? Leave your answers in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I've been Alexandra Macedo. Have an awesome day.